In this episode, we hear from Bjoern Eser. Bjoern is a cancer survivor, amputee, and the creator of the Active Amputee. The Active Amputee is regarded as an incredible resource page for amputees, and it aims to inform, inspire, and engage. In this interview, Bjoern shares his story, talks about his drive to encourage those that struggle, and shares his insight regarding how to adapt. So tune in.
Through that tragedy taught me life is finite. You really have a short window to take what it is from life that you want and enjoy it.
You can go back to that day, February 18, 1990, and change what happened. My honest answer is I wouldn't change it.
You're just going to have to go through it, and your strength is going to be found in simply going through it and being authentic and real in the process.
I was talking with my palliative care doctor today, and she turned around to me and she looked at me and she was like, do you think that you'll eventually beat this? And I was sort of like, yeah, that's probably what I'm trying to do.
No, nothing will ever take away the pain of my daughter not being here. It's my reality.
Well, I know what my body's going to do to me. I've got a wheelchair in my future. But you know what I've been looking for?
What's that?
One with off-road wheels.
Just remembering me as I am, happy and energetic and full of life, no matter what.
You can expect life to kick you in the teeth, but you always get back up, no matter what, and you just keep going.
Living Adaptive with Scott Davidson, a podcast about learning to live adaptively.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back. Hope all is well. I am joined right now by Bjoern Eser, so let's jump right into this interview. What's up, Bjoern Eser? Thanks for coming on, man.
Pleasure.
So you're joining us from the UK, man, but that's not your only place that you've lived. You live like everywhere in the States, and you're from Germany originally. Where else have you lived?
Well, I'm originally from Germany. I lived in Texas way back, 89, 90. I lived in South Africa for a while, in London, in Uganda, in East Timor. And now, I'm kind of commuting a bit between Germany and the UK.
What's your favorite place you lived?
Well, if I could choose East Timor and Nepal, I think kind of half a year there, half a year here. That would be nice.
Why? What's so great about there? I know it's cool there, but what do you like about it?
Well, I think East Timor was just, I lived there and it was like my home away from home. So kind of living next to the beach, having a coral reef just in front of the house. And just having a kind of a slow-paced lifestyle. And I think that in Nepal, it's just the Himalayas and great culture, good food, stunning nature. Yeah, it would be my type of mixture.
Nice, man. Speaking of the Himalayas, you hiked that sucker. What was that like?
Yeah, it's great. It's great to see, going out of the city, getting above the clouds, and just walking for hours, seeing the Himalayas, and just being out in Mother Nature. It's good. I
would love to do that. But hiking the Himalayas, Bjoern, is different for you, man, than a lot of other people because you lost your leg due to bone cancer in, I believe, 2005. When did you learn you have
2005, yeah.
2005.
Sorry?
When did you learn you have cancer, and when did you learn you're going to lose your leg?
Well, it was a long journey. I was diagnosed with bone cancer back in kind of summer of 86, I think that was. So when I was a teenager. But at that time I was lucky. The doctors, they managed to save my leg, chemotherapy and surgeries and, kind of the whole shebang. But I couldn't really use the leg afterwards properly. It was good for walking, but I couldn't run. I couldn't do proper sports. Could live a normal life for roughly 20 years. And then in 2004, I think it was, I had a big infection and it was obvious I had to do something. And all the doctors said, well, the best option would be kind of to stiffen the knee joint and just, get on with life. But that wasn't an option for me. Yeah. The idea of having a stiff leg sounded horrible, I thought. And then I did a bit of research and spoke to a couple of people and was lucky enough to actually also speak to people who, with a medical background, some people who had an amputation themselves. And very soon for me it was obvious. I think the best way forward for me is actually to have the leg amputated and then kind of relearn walking again, but kind of be more independent and don't have to take care of a leg which isn't fully functioning.
Now, your cancer, what year was that again that you first were diagnosed?
That was back in 86.
So you were so young, man. That
I
had
was
to have,
16, yeah.
Yeah, that had to have messed you up pretty good for a little bit. Like you're 16, you're in our world, you're in high school still, and how did that must have really fundamentally changed you though, your mindset and your approach to life.
Well, I mean, it obviously is a shock. I mean, when you're kind of a 15, 16-year-old teenager and you live your normal life and you do the stupid things and do your schoolwork and do all this stuff, and suddenly it says, no, well, actually, you're going to spend the next year in hospital. Yeah, I mean, they're nicer news to get. But, yeah, I mean, my family was great, and the medical team was great. So, once you have to face it, then let's just face it and get on with it. And as I said, I mean, I was lucky. I survived, which is a good first start.
Yeah, for sure.
I was lucky to have my leg. I had two legs, and I could, live a normal life with them. So I think it was, all in all, it was, I mean, you can't choose, so it was okay. But, then 20 years later, or whatever, 25 years later, I think it was time for the next step and say, well, this leg will never really function again, so why not get rid of it and start anew.
Look, hearing this story, you're a really deep person. You're a very thoughtful person. You very philosophical in nature. We even talked about that briefly before. You're into philosophy and those things. Do you think that situation is what fundamentally changed you, shifted you to become really deep about life? Because at 16, not many 16-year-olds are facing a situation where they could die. They could die from cancer. And if they don't, a lot of things could physically change. And do you think that had a large-scale impact?
I mean, it's hard to say. I think it obviously does. I mean, when suddenly out of the blue your life changes when you're 15, 16, all your mates are doing, crazy stuff or just doing the normal school stuff or, being at soccer practice or whatever, and you're in hospital, obviously, I mean, that affects you. And if, as you said, if well, I'm not sure if I'm still alive the next month or the next year, I think it puts things back in perspective, kind of things which sounded horrible or really kind of, I don't know, threw you off balance a year earlier suddenly seem petty and small. Yeah. And so I think that obviously has an effect on you. And also afterwards, I mean, I think you're more thankful. You can't take anything for granted. And I think that shapes you.
Well, a lot of people that are listening might not know that you, Bjoern Eser, you run a pretty significant site, a pretty significant organization called the Adaptive Amputee. And that's adaptiveamputee.org. It seems like we're hitting the second year mark, I believe, really soon. And so what got you to just put yourself out there, to all of a sudden get out there and really just lay it up? Because a lot of people don't want to talk about the hardships and other things. What got you out there?
Well, I think it was a long story. A couple of years ago, 4, 5, 6 years ago, I thought I wanted to do something in addition to kind of my normal day job, where I work in international development aid and kind of travel a lot and, work on conflict areas, post-conflict situations. And I thought I wanted to do more with things which are closer to home, so my disability or however you want to call it. And so obviously for me, the amputation is a big issue, but not in terms of, I can't do anything, but in terms of, here's a new challenge, how do I go about it? And for me, the thing was, I'm quite active. I had a really good supportive environment, kind of where I could try out things. And, people who said, well, yeah, I know you lost a leg, but so what? Let's just still go out and try things. At the same time, I know that many other people don't have that supportive environment and probably have an environment which say, well, you should be lucky you're still alive. And now that you lost a leg, you probably should, pace things down a bit or just get a bit slower and probably not try out too many adventurous things. And so I thought, no, that's what I want to work on. I think there's a niche market out there to assist people with limb differences, other amputees, or people, who just have limb differences and battle with, can I be active? Can I be hiking? Can I go climbing? Can I go kayaking? Can I do things? Just to, encourage them to do things, share stories, and probably give them kind of little life hacks and tips and kind of how-to guides. And that's how it all started.
You're talking about getting out kayaking, hiking, mountain climbing, doing lots of things in nature. And a big portion of this is I want to hit on is you seem to be in a zone or at home in nature. Why is nature so integral to you? And why do you think it's so important to those adapting? Yeah.
I mean, for me, it's, I've always been active. I mean, even, when I was a child with my family, my mother and my father, we went camping and we went hiking and we just, spent time outdoors as a family. So for me, it's always been, that's where I feel at home. At the same time, I notice when I sit at home and, do my normal day job and kind of write reports and, do stuff on the computer, after a day or two, I just notice I'm not balanced. I don't feel fully myself. If I'm not physically active and if I don't have fresh air and, go out. It doesn't have to be something big, just, kind of a 1 hour walk around the block or something. But at the same time, I also noticed for me to really kind of feel confident again in kind of, with a new situation, with having lost a leg and having to learn how to walk again and, developing kind of a new Bjoern, so to say. For me, that also involves to play around with, okay, what is it going back into the hills? Or once I mastered the hills, what is it going back into the mountains? How do I deal with getting a kayak, into the water and out of the water? And once the kayak is in the water, how do I get myself in that kayak and back out?
Yeah, for sure.
Just playing around. And I don't mind taking the mickey out of myself every once in a while, so I don't mind laughing about myself and having fun with it, even if, you're clumsy in the beginning and you fall and this. But at the same time, it builds new skills, it builds confidence, and not just confidence in the very activities. So not just about, okay, I go walking and then I'm a more confident hill walker, but it also builds confidence in kind of the way I behave at home or the way I, can behave at my job. And so I think it's kind of an overall development to kind of play around, okay, with the amputation, what does it mean? What can I do? How does it affect my identity, and how does it affect me in relation with others around me?
I find that right now, especially right now, we've had a loss in the community in terms of the adaptive community, where there was a pretty strong amputee podcast out there,
Yeah, Brian Moser.
Yeah, and unfortunately, he passed, and there's a hole there, and I want to kind of hit on this, and we're going to get back to the nature side, but I want to hit on this. In 2019, you have some pretty cool goals, aggressive goals, I think, like fun. Like in a good way. You're going to start a podcast around April, I believe. At least the plans are around April, somewhere like spring or summertime. And this podcast is going to be monthly based, and you're also going to have video tutorials that go along during the same time frame that focus on those amputees, people with limb differences, and so forth. Can you explain what you plan on doing here?
As you mentioned earlier, I run this resource page, a kind of a weekly blog, which is called the Active Amputee, as you said, the activeamputee.org. And that's I started that back in April 2017, just with, sharing stories once a week, twice a week. And now that I think the site now is quite well established, get quite good traffic, get good feedback, get lots of questions, individual questions, people who say, I want to do A, B, C, D, can you give me advice on how to go about it? So I think it's now time to start something new. And as you said, new year, new ideas, 2019.
For sure.
I thought, I'm a great fan of podcasts. So I thought, why not give podcasting a try? Especially for people who, it takes time to sit down and read. And we all know, time is, sitting down in front of a computer to reading longer articles, not everyone's cake. So I thought it's great to have something which people can consume while they're in the car or, I don't know, under the shower, doing the laundry, whatever, out running. So yes, a monthly podcast, a mixture of, let's say, news from the industry, so to say. What are new developments in the prosthetic sector? What are sporting events? How do you get grants for, adaptive sports equipment, that stuff? And at the same time, also interviews with kind of people who I find inspiring, people who I find very motivating, or people who just overcome certain challenges, a bit like your podcast, but more focused on really people with limb differences and mainly amputees.
I think you have a good realm for this too. I like a good mind for it, should I say, instead of realm. But I think you have a really good mind for this because you highlight a lot of these stories already on your site, and you build pretty comprehensive, cool lists of like best podcasts, best whatever it is, best companies to work with, best, you point out
Instagram, TED Talks, whatever. Yeah.
So I think like that's really a cool idea for sure. And then the video side, what do you plan to do there?
Well, there's a mixture. I do some people, I get more and more questions about, well, I saw you got back into hiking, or I saw you got back into kayaking after the amputation. Can you give me some tips? Just people who approach me on, either send me a mail or, shoot me direct message on social media. And I started writing little guides for the blog, kind of 10 easy steps to get into paraclimbing or, stuff like that. And I thought it would be cool just to make them a bit nicer by doing little videos and saying, well, here are some of the things which worked for me. If you want to get into kayaking as an amputee, this is what you could try. Or this is how you should, or these are some of the options you have in modifying your boat. Or, well, here's a little comparative test of, 2 or 3 different adaptive climbing feet gear stuff you might want to use. Like, these are the pros and cons of this foot, and these are the pros and cons of this foot. And, stuff like that people get a better idea. Okay, not just the written word where you think, well, how do people, especially if English is not someone's first language, that people have an easier access to all the information by, having visuals, by having video content.
Yeah, for sure. Well, you're German by nature, man, so you could open up that German market too. I think it's probably missing big time over there.
It is. I actually get quite a lot of things because I work together with 2 people from medical field. Someone is specialized on cancer treatment for children, and obviously has a lot to do with amputation. He says, your page is great, but actually most of our patients can't read it. And I said, well, I need to work on kind of a bilingual site. And I mean, if I get some of the articles are originally written in Germany by, guest bloggers, and then I leave them in Germany on there and I translate them, but I haven't gotten around to actually the stuff which comes in English to actually translate into German or French or whatever.
I want to hop to this because you're going to be doing this podcast, these videos and so forth, but you have a history of seeing a lot of stories, and you've even aired a lot of these stories or shared them. And and you've gone through cancer, and bad shit happens all the damn time. It just does. And it's not in our control when that happens and when it lands on our doorstep, when it arrives to us. What do you see is the difference between those, especially amputees, because you have a real knowledge base there too, between those that have really adapted and thrived versus those that kind of just didn't? What was the traits, or what do you see when it comes to the differences?
I think it's hard to say because I mean, obviously the people who react to the way I very often, for the blog, the way I collect the stories, the way I get in touch with people, I see people on Instagram or something, or hear something on the news, or, just somewhere see a picture of someone, an amputee, and try to find out who it is and how to get in touch with them. And obviously, I think there's kind of a first filter in there because I think the people who thrive and the people who accept the amputation and the people who kind of said, well, that's just the way it is, so let's make something out of it and let's just go on with life and see if, see how I adapt, how do I grow with this new challenge. I think these are probably the ones who get back to me while the others don't. So I guess the people I know are, it's not representative for the whole amputee community. But looking at the people I know, I think the key is just accepting that, no matter what hit you, like if you were born with a missing limb, or if I don't know, you had a motorcycle accident or cancer, or I don't know, frostbite in the Alps or whatever, just saying, well, there's the question, why me, or why did I lose a leg or something, it's just completely irrelevant. I mean, it's gone. So let's accept it and embrace it and just, get on with life. I think that's the key. And for some people that's easier, for some people that's harder, for some people it takes a bit longer, for some people it's kind of a, well, okay, here it is, next week I'm fine. And I think once people have mastered that first step, I think then they're fine of saying, okay, that's where we are right now, or that's where I am right now, and how do I want to live my life 6 months down the line, a year down the line, 2 years down the line. And suddenly you have all these really inspiring, really motivational stories. Well, I always thought I was quite active until I started the research for my blog.
Oh, goddamn. I know, man. There's so many people that are so active. Caitlin Connor I just had on. I'm like, Jesus, slow down, please.
Yeah. I always thought, I was like the only amputee I really know. I mean, there were 1 or 2 other people from the from the rehab time, but I lost sight of them, and so I thought, oh no, I'm walking, I'm doing this and this, and then now I have all these other people where I think, oh shoot, I'm a couch potato compared to them.
Yeah.
So I think it's the acceptance. I think it's having a good sense of humor combined with, let's say, a good degree of stubbornness. So obviously, if you try something out, which is much harder as an amputee, obviously in the beginning, it's harder, it's more challenging. You need to find out your own approach about how to approach things best and how to do things, and very often you can't just ask a coach who normally trains able people or able-bodied people. So it's a trial and error approach, and that means you have to be able to kind of laugh a lot and accept a bit of failure, and then just not give up. And I think that these are probably the two main differences, where I say, well, the people who don't accept their limitations or don't accept kind of their limb loss, and then the ones who just give up if it doesn't work out the first time, or just say, well, I can't climb, I'm missing an arm, or I don't get my boat in the water, so I can't kayak or whatever. I think that's where you get the two main differences, I think, personally. But I might be wrong on that one. That's just my personal take on it.
Well, a lot of our stories here are different takes on it. That's the good thing, is we want those different takes. In your case, you say the why me's. There's no point in focusing on the why me's. How did you go from victim status? How did you specifically go from maybe you were never there I'm a victim to I am not a victim of my circumstances? I'm going to go do some stuff.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I think that too, obviously, for me, it was way different when you're diagnosed with cancer when you're a teenager, and, obviously your parents make many of the decisions because, it's just, they have to agree with the doctors on things where you're consulted, but you can't actually make an independent decision, I think, as a teenager. I think it's completely different when I had to make the decision if the leg stays or if the leg and I go different ways, and it goes. And for me, it's kind of this, I don't like being at the receiving end of the decision of medical personnel or other experts or something. So for me, it was like, okay, there's a problem. And then, taking some time to actually say, well, what is it I actually want? What do I, for myself, find more important? Keeping two legs, even if one is not functional or not fully functional, or to actually put a priority on being able to be active, being able to kind of live an independent life, which doesn't constantly involve trips to the hospital or taking care of metal implants in my leg, which can constantly break or something. And then really saying, well, yeah, I'm listening to medical advice, but in the end, it's me making the decision, not some doctor or surgeon or whatever. And I think just feeling this responsibility for your own journey, and then saying, well, what does it mean? And being willing to take the consequences, because obviously you don't know if, for me, once I made the decision, okay, I think for me an amputation looks like it's the best option. It might be that actually, okay, they chop off the leg and actually, no, actually that was a shit option. There's no way of going back, but having this, being willing to accept the consequences of your decisions, I think that's key for me, kind of, so that you don't have the feeling, oh, well, I'm at the receiving end of decisions, and then obviously you tend to blame others if it doesn't go the way you want it to.
If you accept these consequences, you can live in that realm of, I fucked up, I have regret. How do you get out of that regret realm?
Well, I wouldn't know because things worked very well for me. I mean, I was 24 hours after surgery, I was off the painkillers, and
nice.
I don't know. As soon as the wound allowed, we did the first diagnostic socket, and I was walking, I don't know, 6 weeks later or something. So I was back full time at work, I think 3 months later, with trips abroad to East Africa. And so I guess I was one of the very lucky ones. As I said, I think stubbornness kind of helped. So every night, whenever the others went to bed, I practiced walking stairs up and down, and whenever there was a break in between rehab sessions, I kind of said, can I have the key to the gym? Can I have the key to the swimming pool? I want to put in an extra hour of exercise. So I think that helps, but I'm not kidding myself. I mean, there's a certain degree of luck and just, for some people it works, for others it doesn't. I don't know. With the amputation, I haven't been in that state of, well, shit, that was not what I wanted.
Like when you say like you're up there walking, you're just no quit in you. Who do you point to? Who do you think of? I mean, you talk about this a bit in your blog, but like, what's the first name of a person that motivates you and gets you going?
I mean, the very clinic where I was in, the main surgeon there was an above the knee amputee himself, and he was also part of the German Paralympic downhill skiing team and something. So there was someone where I saw, well, this guy had a motorcycle accident when he was a student, and he got back, and I had the feeling we kind of bonded easily because I saw, well, you can live a pretty normal life even with an amputation and can do stuff. And I think he saw that I have the fire to get back into normal life as soon as possible. So he gave me a bit of, let's say, when I wanted extra treatment in terms of, extra physio sessions and stuff, he said, let me see what's possible. So I think that was good. And for me, it was clear. I knew as soon as I leave the hospital, or as soon as I leave the rehabilitation center, which was all in the same building, was kind of one institution there. I knew I'll leave there. I'm going to go back to London. I'm going to live. I was living myself. I had a job. I knew as soon as I'm out of the hospital, I need to be able to get through my day, do my shopping, do my work, do my cooking, and there's no one else to help me. So it was obvious, I step out of that clinic door. I need to be able to live my life independently, work full time, and, run a household. So there was nothing like, well, I go home and sit in a wheelchair and someone else will cook my food. So I think that's quite an incentive.
Yeah, for sure. That's a definite incentive.
I must say I got to know lots of really inspiring and motivational amputees now in the last 3-4 years. Mm-hmm. But before, I mean, except for myself, I didn't know any other amputee, as in really knowing them a bit more. I mean, obviously there are the people, who are sitting next to you while you're waiting for your diagnostic socket or something, when you're with your prosthesis or something. But I didn't know any other amputee before that. So for me, it was really, and then I lived abroad a long time, kind of far away from regular internet and stuff. So for me, it was just living my life. And then I only got to know other amputees with more inspiring stories in the last 3-4 years, and mainly now since I started this kind of the Active Amputee blog.
Now, here's a question for you. We talk about developing the ability to get in there, adapt a bunch, and what is one trait that someone can develop if they're going through something or about to go through something? What is one trait one can develop, a personal trait that they can actually work on in order to approach something difficult?
Well, for me, it's always this thing like, how do I want to live my life, let's say, half a year or a year down the line? So for me, it's always this, okay, I'm very good in having these kind of mid to long-term ideas. Okay, here's my ideal. A year down the line, this is how I want to live my life. And what needs to happen now that this life I want to live becomes a reality. And if that means being more active, or if that means I actually need to learn how to use that leg properly, or if that means, I actually want to be more out in nature, so I need to make sure I know how to walk up and down on whatever snowy slopes or so. For me, it's really this kind of having something which is further away than kind of my day-to-day routine of next week, but not too far away to kind of, it looks kind of just like a dream, but something I can connect to. And then breaking it down to, okay, if I want this to be a reality 6 months down the line, what needs to happen 3 months down the line? What needs to happen 1 month down the line? And for me, it's kind of just breaking it down and making things which seem big or daunting or very challenging, breaking them down into smaller chunks. And that's also how I did it when I first thought, okay, I want to get back into climbing, and, is climbing with one leg a really good idea or not? And it might look, okay, indoors, but what about going, out into the hills, into the mountains, and then really breaking it down. Okay, what's the first step? Where should I start? What are the easy entry ones? What are the easy wins? And then slowly building confidence, and then also building the fun with it, pushing your comfort zone a bit, and then just, getting things done.
So that brings up this next question, because based on your response, you're a very peace building, conflict resolution by nature, by profession, expert in this realm. How do you apply this knowledge to adapting, for instance?
Ooh, I haven't really mixed those too much in recent years, but I think one thing where I'm carried by a related attitude, or where I kind of draw on the same motivation. So I think it's this kind of the base of optimism, I would probably call. Always thinking, not everything is ideal, but still there's a lot of good things. And I think that's the same. Let's say if you have a physical limitation, or if you were challenged with, I don't know, if your life really threw some obstacles in your way, a loss of a loved one, or loss of a limb, or in my case, being diagnosed with cancer as a teenager, and then losing a limb with 40. And you always think, well, that's not ideal, but that's not the end of the world. There's always something worth living for out there, and let's make the best out of it. And I think it's similar in my work. I mean, I'm very often work in conflict areas and work areas, or in post-conflict areas where societies really went through upheavals, through war, through armed conflict. You would say, well, there's a lot of shit going on here, but there's also a lot of things worth living for and worth developing and reestablishing, and I think in both ways, well, it probably sounds a bit cheesy, but kind of this healing. You're healing after overcoming a challenge as an individual, and healing as a society, after overcoming a challenge as, a society challenge, a bigger challenge. And I think this is where these two things are actually related, and where I probably draw on similar motivation to be engaged in.
Yeah, man, I could see that. And I don't think that's cheesy, man. There's a process of healing. Everybody's got to heal, right? That's where you come in too, though. You're out in nature healing. And I think that's a different perspective than some bring in. A lot are in the gym healing, or they're, wherever they're healing. And unfortunately, a lot are in hospital bed healing, or some are facing an environment. We've had guests on. We had guests on that did, have osteosarcoma and unfortunately passed, and it's really a tough situation. Life will have those curveballs. Nothing will be perfect. There will be unexpected events, and there will be time to heal too for a lot of people. and getting that healing so important, Yeah. No, I fully agree. And also taking it out completely of not just limiting it to kind of the medical professional healing, but really kind of a comprehensive, being in balance with yourself. And how do you approach a holistic healing for you? Like, what would you say?
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously there's a medical aspect. I mean, especially when you're through, chemotherapy or something like that, or, other really life-changing events. I think there's a medical component, but I think there's also the social component about how do you, about acceptance, about participation in society, in your community, as in the family, your village, kind of your whatever where you're living in, so that you have a feeling you're accepted, you're socially accepted. You don't, have the feeling you need to hide something, or you can't be yourself, even if it means, you lost a leg, maybe you stutter, maybe you have some things where society around you has problems with. I think that needs to be part of the social healing, that you say, well, I have a healthy environment in terms of, where I can be who I want to be, but then also kind of this feeling in balance with yourself. And as you mentioned a few times, for me, that means being out in nature. I mean, if I'm a grumpy old fart at home because, I don't know, work is going on my nerves, or, just whatever, you're stressed and you have deadlines to meet, and I take my hiking boots, I take my hiking poles, and I disappear for a couple of hours, and I come back and I'm all chilled.
Well, you're at a good place now. You're at a good place, but maybe when you're 16, you weren't. You ever want to go back and say something? If you could, what would you say?
Well, I think I think even with 16 it was okay. As I said, but then it was more. I had an environment which accepted, which was supportive, and at the same time didn't let me get into a dark hole. I mean, obviously, when you're diagnosed with cancer as a teenager, there's a temptation of, this why me, and everything is, the world conspired against me, and But I had an environment which, on the one hand, kind of was caring and loving and supporting, and at the other hand was challenging me, even saying, we know at the moment you're not yourself, and we know there's some things you can't do, but that doesn't mean we can't demand things from you. So I think this kind of the balance was important to make sure you're not, you're not drifting off. And that was good. And so I think I was fine at that moment.
Yeah, I can resonate with that. I grew up on a personal note, I grew up with that environment where there was they didn't care what you were going through necessarily. It's just like, say you're playing a sport, it didn't matter. Yeah. You just got to figure it out and do it well. Yeah. So I didn't stick in that realm where I can't do this. I just didn't. I'm just like, fuck, this is hard, but I better figure this out and figure it out quick.
Yeah. And I think it's, even at that time you think, oh no, so I'm sick, Mom, I can't clear the table or whatever. No, I can't bring out the rubbish because, I have cancer. And you think, well, no, my son, you can.
Yeah, you will.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not going to stop.
I think that's good. I mean, obviously at that time you think, oh no, why can't my brother do that? And you actually think, no, it's part of this keeping a bit of discipline to say, there's some things where people just need to accept there's something which is not possible at the moment, and they do. And there's some other things where it's just a lousy excuse not to do things. And this is where you need a kick in the behind.
You brought up the family, man. I got to ask this. I'm just kidding. You write about this a lot. In fact, you did a really profound piece where you talked about being a dad, and you have 3 kids, 3 amazing, awesome kids. And when you had your leg amputated, I believe you're a father at the time, at least to one of those kids, right? And so you talk about, you have like a really cool article about what it was like, to first, accept that you can't do some things, and then what were the positives that could come out of that situation. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, well, my wife brought 2 kids in our relationship, and so the 2 older kids, just got to know me with 1 leg, so they've never seen me with 2 legs. So obviously for them there was kind of a quick learning curve, but they were great. They were fine with that. And then there's our joint, the youngest one, who was born after I lost my leg. So also for him, he just knows daddy has 1 leg. That's just how a daddy is. But the thing obviously is, when let's say the baby cries during the night, and obviously you're not wearing your prosthesis in bed, so when you get up and hop around on 1 leg carrying your baby, and there's some things where you just think, having 1 leg just sucks. I just want to, get out of bed and do things. Or you want to run next to your kid when they start riding the bike or something, and you think, oh shit, I'm not fast enough. But then at the same time, I think this is more something that annoys me. It's nothing that annoys the kids. For them it's no problem. That's just how, daddy has 1 leg, so there's some things he can do and there's some things he can't do, and that's just how it is. But I think at the same time there's I actually think there are benefits. And I think one thing obviously is, and that's something I said earlier, I have the feeling many people with disabilities have the feeling they're not fully accepted in society. People stare, or people stare the other way, or make sure they don't mention anything that might be offending or something like that. So it feels a bit artificial. But if you grow up in the family around someone with a disability, that's just normal. It's just part of the family. So, they don't mind taking the mickey out of me, and they also know there's some things where they have to be a bit more careful, and there's some other things where they don't have to be careful. And my little one likes to run away with my leg every once in a while. So you jump out of the shower and you think, oh, I'm sure there was a leg earlier.
Yeah.
And, just that stuff. And I think for them, kind of seeing this kind of, let's say, this diversity in human abilities while they grow up. So I think it's it's great for them to see. They're just people of different abilities, and some people have different needs, and that's just how it is. And that's where you need to play your part so that everyone feels happy in that, in kind of these different combinations. So I think that's actually an advantage. I mean, I don't want to say every dad has to chop off a limb just to give kids this experience, but
that's what we're requesting of the listeners right now.
Yeah, no, I'm not going that far.
Yeah,
and also for the kids to learn early that they have to play their role sometimes, where in other families actually daddy would play a bigger role, but he can't in this case. Some issues where they know here. Then the older ones know this is my part. And so they take the responsibility early on, which I think is great. And there are just some things where I think it's good to kind of live this diversity and not hide it, or not try to be superhuman and try to do everything when it is much harder. And actually the kids can do it, and they're willing to do it, and they like doing stuff.
That's cool to hear your interactions with your kids. I do like that your kid steals your leg. That's actually really funny. I hope it continues. I hope it continues.
Don't tell him that you like it.
Yeah, for the sake of comedy, I hope it continues. I'm very much into. But yeah, hey, you have also. I wanted to hit on this too, while it's on my mind. You're well read. You're well researched, but you're also into the practical side of things. We talked about this before outside of this interview, but you're very much a practical person. We've been starting this thing, like trying to get more sources out, more resources to people listening. What's like a personality or something like that people can follow, take home from this, besides following you, which they should do, but then also, right. And then, but yeah, also what's something that you can point to?
Well, as I said earlier, I'm quite a podcast man, so I really like audio stuff because it's something I can do while I do other things. I hardly ever find the time to actually sit down and read properly. So I think, you mentioned Brian Moser's podcast earlier, your podcast, and I think they're actually not that many. I think there are only 5 or 6 podcasts, which I would say kind of they are, they're top of the list. And as we know, the one stopped now due to Brian's passing away. Some others, I mean, they recorded great episodes until 2 or 3 years ago, so some of the podcasts are not updated, there's no new stuff anymore. So I think podcasts are great. Then actually I'm not sure about blogs. So this probably sounds completely arrogant, but I actually think in terms of personal collections, I think my one is probably in the top 5.
Man, you got a good site. That's a pro site, my man. That's a great site.
I think it's a good, let's say, a starting point for people who want to get some inspiration, want to hear some personal stories, want to have some life hacks. And I think it fits nicely into that niche between a purely personal blog where someone recounts his or her personal story, where you say, after some time it might, there might not be that much new stuff which people want to follow. And then kind of the professional sites from, Autoboc or the Amputee Coalition or something, which are great resources, but which very often lack a bit of the approachability and a personal touch. So if people actually have then questions which might go beyond, what is a good foot for someone who is whatever, that level of activity, where people very often find it harder to just, write an email and say, hey, actually, I want to do ABCD. Can you give me some personal advice on how to best go about it? And I think my page fits nicely into that kind of the niche in between, kind of the purely personal one and the professional ones, kind of the ones run by big organizations or companies.
Yeah, I do too, for sure.
Yeah.
Now, here's one thing I've got for you. We're introducing you to a new audience, some will be the same, a lot will be new, and being that we're introducing you to a new audience, if you had a sentence or two to say who you are to be looked back on, what would it be?
I think it would be great if people remember me as someone who was active or is active as an amputee, who had a good sense of humor, who never shied away from trying out something new and didn't mind laughing about himself if it didn't work out, and who managed to encourage others, and especially people who are not naturally kind of the sporty, the pioneering, outgoing ones, to just try out something new and find something which they find rewarding, fulfilling, something they wouldn't have tried without me.
Right.
Or where I helped them making the first step. Like people who probably thought, no, actually maybe I'm too old, too overweight, too unfit, too whatever, my amputation is too high or too severe to give it a try at whatever, water skiing or something, and where they say, no, actually, after having had a chat with Bjoern, having consulted his blog or something, I think I should give it a go.
Yeah, I think they
I
should
think
give it a
be
go.
nice.
Right?
Yeah.
Don't just wait for it to happen or wait to figure it out. Just don't even figure it out. That's one thing I encourage is reckless abandon. I seriously do. There's at some point, you can never be safe enough. Something could always happen. You might as well just give it a try. I mean, what the hell? Why not? Live a little bit.
And I think there's a saying, and I think it's something like, I prefer an oops to a what if. So I think give it a try. If they say, yeah, I tried kayaking and I tried this on, actually, it's not mine, but now I know it's not mine. And I don't look back 10 years later and say, I wish I would have tried that. So, yeah, I hope I managed to encourage a few people just to do things. Just give it a try.
Absolutely. I mean, I agree with that attitude. No regrets, man. Just move forward and go after it. I mean, we're all going to feel those regrets. They're going to be in our minds at times, but just keep pushing forward the best you can.
Fully agree. Yeah.
Mind hacks, man. You said mind hacks before we round this thing out, which or you said hacks, sorry, but I leaned towards mind hacks. I don't know if that was, I guess, a Freudian slip there. But point being is that, what's your favorite hacks, man? Like, what are some of your favorite hacks?
As you know, I'm very active, and at the same time, I have a socket which hasn't been, it doesn't fit well for years. So for me, many life hacks is playing around with how to ensure that you have a socket that allows you to do things. So from cutting up old liners to whatever, just playing around while others always run back to their prothetists. And for me, very often I'm too far away from it to just, kind of your DIY socket building prothetist with whatever lies around in the house, which very often is, I think, quite funny when you look around all the stuff which I stuff into my socket just to make it fit. That's one. And then the other one is I really, really enjoy playing around with what makes me fitter and more competent in hill walking. And that's partly just testing gear and what works for me and what doesn't, and kind of playing around with walking techniques on, ice and scree and kind of loose gravel, and what kind of gear can I carry up and down the mountain myself without kind of looking like a mule and huffing and puffing like an old hippo. They're just playing around really now, after a couple of years, having my set of gear that works for me and knowing, okay, I can handle that terrain and I can handle that distance in more or less this time and still have a good time with it. I think these are the two where I spend my time and where I like to play around and where I like to give people advice on by now. Yeah.
You had cancer at 16. You have your leg amputated in 2005. Now, was it more difficult to go through cancer at that age or to have your leg amputated?
Well, the leg amputation was much, much easier because for me it was, on the one hand, I was an adult. I made the decisions, so I had the feeling, I was in charge, so to say. And I made the decision against the advice from medical personnel. So it was a bit of a fight, but I had the feeling, no, I know what I want, and this is how we're going to do it. And obviously for me, it was my leg, the roughly 2.5 years before the amputation, I had lots of pain most of the time. Not pain you couldn't bear, but kind of I was, always this low-level pain which kind of made you miserable for years. And the leg was hardly functioning. So, I couldn't put weight on it properly. So I was basically dragging myself to work in the morning, dragging myself back home in the afternoon, and then just resting so that I'm fit for work again the next morning. And so for me, obviously, then the amputation was kind of a way out of the situation. And so after the amputation, I didn't compare the missing limp to a fully functioning leg, but to a leg which was a complete nuisance for the last roughly 2 years previous to the amputation. And so obviously suddenly I had no more pain, and suddenly it was up to me to learn walking again, and not this, well, even if I put in all the exercise, because of the infection and because of some other things, I wasn't able to walk. So for me, it was something where I suddenly was in a much better situation. While obviously when you're a teenager and you're suddenly from one day to the next diagnosed with cancer, and you are fully fit and you're doing quite a lot of sports before, and suddenly you're hospital bed bound for a year, that was much harder to bear.
Yeah. I was curious about that because reading your story, I'm like, well, there's two different there's two different periods in his life where in two different situations and ways, and it's interesting to see how each one impacted. And it seems like you're really almost rejuvenated coming out of 2005, ready, like kind of fired up. Let's go try some things,
Yeah. I did. It was something where I suddenly had the feeling, well, okay, the thing which caused the problem is gone, and now it's up to me to learn walking again and get better. And there's no excuse. I had no hardly any phantom pain. I was fit. Had a good health insurance. So it was really, okay, you put in the work, you're going to walk. You don't put in the work, you don't. And, it's that makes it easy.
Yeah. Now, we have the activeamputee.org. People can go there. What's the best way to get in contact with you? Is it through there or through your Instagram or something else?
Well, I am on Instagram. So you can get in contact with me via Instagram direct message. I normally respond to that pretty quickly. Otherwise, there's a contact page on the Active Amputee. I'm on Twitter. I'm not on Facebook. I think the easiest, if you have more than just a hi, please check my pictures too. I think the easiest is probably going through the contact page on theactiveamputee.org.
Nice. I think there's a great theme to your episode, to your interview. One of them, or that theme, is responsibility for your own journey. There really is a reality to that. And I really appreciate you sharing your journey, man.
Pleasure. Glad I had the opportunity to talk with you here.
All right, that's the episode. Remember, you can find contact information for guests in the show notes or on our website, livingadaptive.com. On livingadaptive.com, you can also find previous episodes, writings, and a bunch of other good stuff. So go there. Peace.